everyone, and thank you for choosing This Week in Guns, brought to you by Patriot Patch Company, BZ Grips, MAF Corporation, FFL Payments. This show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and more. I'm your host, Matthew LaRosiere, and I'm joined today by Dave Brett.
I had 2 or 3 different ideas, and then I couldn't decide like how I actually wanted to put the ideas together, and so I was just like, I'll just sort of like throw them together.
Well, and that you did. that really is something. Let's get a highlight here.
There we go.
It's pretty good for you audio listeners. I'll describe that the image is pretty good. All right. All right. So it's been a minute, and that's largely because I was really making sure everything was nailed down for the opening briefs in the Adamiak case. And so I guess we can talk about that at first. I don't know why I didn't put that as a story. Cool. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, so this was the opening brief in the Adamiak case. This was the Navy sailor, very young man, who was convicted to 20 years for having parts kits and cut up. All of the stuff was basically harmless. 2 inert RPGs that had conspicuously written training aid dummy and inert on them, a parts kit, and some other things. And yeah, 20 years. That's a little bit too much. So we wanted to make sure that everything was all nailed down in this brief. And it's 77 pages. And what was the word count? The limit was 13,000 words, and we came in at 12,976. So it was a lot. But yeah, just to give you guys an idea, the summary of the argument section is, a great place to just get the main points of a brief.
To get a summary of the arguments, actually.
Yeah. So yeah. The summary of the argument: it would be absurd for an indictment under the Controlled Substances Act to simply allege that a defendant possessed a Schedule I substance without more. Rather, it must identify precisely the substance alleged, because the chemical and legal definition of the substances is itself technical and requires precision. Appellant here, though, was charged in the superseding indictment with the knowing receipt and possession of a firearm, namely a PPSH machine gun, which was not registered to him in violation of blah, blah, blah. A quick glance of 5845 shows no less than 7 independent definitions of machine gun, each with divergent essential elements. Each of the charges of the indictment were this conclusory, depriving the appellant of the notice required by the Sixth Amendment. Beyond the indictment, pivotal in this case is the classification of the affected articles as unlawfully transferred and possessed NFA firearms, which is a legal question of statutory interpretation. There are no questions of degree when it comes to the NFA. Something is or is not a machine gun or destructive device. The district court erred in failing to resolve and then submitting to the jury this legal question. Even so, no reasonable jury properly instructed could have returned a conviction as to Mr. Adamiak. The theory that something is what it resembles in the firearms context was recently held to be without any objective hook in the statute by the Fifth Circuit. Rather than pointing to any particularly dangerous characteristics of the subject articles or any evidence of what the articles actually were, the government rests its entire theory on its own unpublished, unpromulgated opinions as to where lines are to be drawn. That is exclusively the role of Congress. If the statute actually prescribes destroyed, incomplete, and non-functional items, then it is incredibly vague on that point and must be narrowly construed to avoid an absurd result in constitutional shortfalls. If, on the other hand, the destroyed relics somehow fall under 5845, then it is an unconstitutional, then it is an accoutrement qualifying as an arm under the Second Amendment, and thus it was the government's burden to show that criminalizing things like these parts is deeply rooted in American legal text, history, and tradition. The government refused to do so, and the district court allowed it to shirk this burden. And so then, yeah, we go on another like 60 pages after that. But if you're interested in it, there's a lot of like, I think there's a lot of interesting parts in this that people who are gun people would be interested in learning about, right? Like a lot of people rest on the machine, once a machine gun, always a machine gun thing. And that actually hasn't always proven the day in court, right? And we talk about quite a few of those cases. We talk about, what is constructive possession, right? How has that been found in those cases, and why it obviously isn't here? And then you also get a little look into how the government goes about proving that these things are weapons, which is that they say they are.
And it's pretty darn vile, because I know people point to what's going on with the I mean, even back to the bump stocks or the pistol braces or the frames of the receiver, and and they're saying like, well, look, the ATF's trying to get around Congress. You're trying to do all this stuff. Well, the really fucked up thing is with machine guns, the ATF's been doing this for a long time, and they didn't have the courtesy to pass a rule through the APA to say this is the way it is. They've relied on like these opinion letters that they even admit when they issue them have no force in law. That's just something that they invented. It's not subject to review, and it doesn't actually have to be consistent with the law. It's just them saying, this is what we think today.
Right.
And they then point to this in court as being like some sort of authoritative guidance on what is and isn't a machine gun. And that's wildly constitutionally problematic, because that makes them all three branches of government.
Right.
Because the judge defers to them on this question of law. They defer to themselves on making up this law. And Congress is just like, yeah, we banned those in 34, didn't we? And doesn't give a shit otherwise, because they're obviously not stepping up to like say, hey, ATF, you shouldn't exist.
Right. So yeah, that's some really fascinating stuff. And like, a lot of people talk about, oh, well, what is reasonably readily restored? Does that mean easily converted? And no. And we actually get into the history of that stuff here too. But the biggest problem I saw was that, the government at trial kept saying, well, it's just not destroyed enough. And even with that, right, they'd be questioned, what do you mean not destroyed enough? They'd be like, oh yeah, for an RPG, you got to do this, and then you got to do that, and you got to do the other thing. It's like, okay, well, where is this written down? Well, we have some of these published on our website. And so they have like 4 published on their website that they did in 2003. None of those cover a PPSH or an RPG, by the way, or an M203. And then, so what I dug up here, they were questioned in 2003 after writing those things, which were addressed to importers, by the way. So the context of those letters where they're like, here's how to cut it up. It's if you want to import these for unrestricted commercial sale, right? That's a pretty specific context. Right. The industry complained and said, wait, how are you not doing this through notice and comment? And they're like, well, because it's obvious. We're just saying what we think. It doesn't like bind you. You don't have to follow it. And we even recognize in our letters that there's other ways to cut it. You can do a lot of different ways. But then
you go and do it any other way, and they run screaming to a court, going, they didn't listen. They didn't listen. They didn't do what we said. They didn't do the law. They didn't do the law. It's not destroyed enough, which is bizarre.
But so yeah, you guys, check out the brief. I'd love to hear your feedback. Really praying that the Fourth Circuit, comes down and does just as good here, because that guy should not be in jail. He's a really good guy. He didn't do anything wrong. Next up, Tennessee governor signs bill allowing teachers and staff to be armed on campus, and
People have opinions about it.
People don't like it. Yeah. So there's an image on the screen. Protesters watched from the House Gallery at the Tennessee State Capitol building as representatives voted on the bill. No to HB 1202. No, HB 1202. And like, this is Bill Lee, the same guy who was like,
we need red flag laws.
Yeah, he was desperate for red flag laws, and now he's like, I mean, I guess it might be the like Republican, mainstream Republican idea of we got to do something. You're gonna take our schools, and so we'll give the teacher the gun, right? So like, I guess it's somewhat consistent, but I don't know. I don't really think much about these laws. What do you?
I generally tend to support these laws. I just think that the pro-gun community is really bad at framing them, where like in some cases they even lean into the framing that we should arm the teachers, which to the layman sounds horrible because it sounds like like
you're issuing them a gun.
It says like, "Hello, Mrs. Stevens. Here's your rifle."
Yeah,
and that's that.
Mrs. Stevens,
for you. And that, that's obviously not what's going on here. And that I think this is much better framed from a standpoint of like, there are some states that have passed laws that if your employer can't bar you from having a gun to defend yourself.
Right.
And this is effectively no different. It's like saying that the Federal Gun-Free Zone Act shouldn't stop the people who work there from being able to defend themselves.
Right.
Because if we're to accept this anti-gunner Looney Tunes world where like schools get shot up constantly,
right? Even though they're statistically the safest place you could be.
Right. Like no one would want to be a teacher because like, I mean, it's a death sentence for you, right? Your options are like sit there and maybe hope you can barricade the door, but like you should be able to defend your own life. You being teacher shouldn't like have you just abandon your ability to defend yourself. Then of course these states can come up with whatever hilarious checks and balances they want along the way, like we want you to get a permit and prove that you are a good person before you can have your rifle, Mrs. Stevens. But I think the anti-gunners, I don't think they're as guilty as the pro-gun side in this particular case, but I think they also sort of overplay their hands on these because much like all the public carry stuff, their reception of this is always like this is going to be blood in the streets. This is going to be bloody murder. Teachers are going to be accidentally shooting kids Teachers are going to like reach for the chalkboard to like shoot 3 kids in the head and murder them. It's all doom and gloom.
I saw some political cartoons about it that were just fantastic.
And like invariably these things don't happen and like crime doesn't go up. There's not like increased numbers of because of course like even with them being banned, there's teachers who bring guns to school to protect themselves or for whatever, and then have accidents happen with them. So like this stuff already happens some. The rates at which it happens aren't going to go up in a statistically significant way. And I think the anti-gunners' resistance to these things is twofold. First, I think it's a knee-jerk reaction, but I think the reason that knee-jerk reaction exists is because they know deep down, once this becomes normal, people will see it's not a problem. And I think that's the reason they're so resistant to, I mean, at first it was concealed carry at all, and now it's like to quote unquote constitutional carry. They're hyper resistant to this idea because they realize that 1 year, once you can do your first case study on what happened in the states that have constitutional carry now, 1 year in, their crime rates just trace the national average. It didn't change. And this is really, really bad for anti-gunners because like you don't have a useful statistic. And if you're an anti-gunner and you don't have a useful statistic, that means that your policy's bad. Right. And you have to find something else to complain about. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is though, is they can keep calling wolf and it doesn't really matter to their base though. We say that, oh, this is bad for them because like they're freaking out about the school thing, but then nothing's going to happen. And guess what? It's not going to matter because their core audience never has been people who like are interested in statistics and are interested in like data-driven policing.
Oh, right. Well, guns to them are a talisman, and it just so happens the satanic talisman. It's like evil. It is pure evil where there is nothing that has ever nothing good has ever happened
come of it,
because of a gun or around a gun. Never happened.
And so they're just going to be like, they're not going to care. So it's almost like, why even bother positioning? Well, I guess for the same reason pro-gun groups.
I think it's the 10-80-10 thing where 10% of either extreme is going to view whatever their polarizing issue is as like anything revolving around it. It's like a talisman. It's this thing that's like, it's unassailable truth. It's true north. You can't say anything to change their mind about it. Right. But I think for that 80% in the middle, and I mean, really from a standpoint of Overton window shifts, that it happened massively in the past 20 years with handguns, especially. But carry is becoming more and more that way. Where like even at the time Heller happened, right? Public opinion of handguns wasn't fantastic, and public carry was like, it was like, yeah, you can do that in Montana in states with bears, but you weren't really doing that anywhere else. Right. 20 years removed from that, we've got the Supreme Court saying, yeah, of course you can carry guns everywhere. What's the big deal? And Stephen Gutowski on the Reload, I think, was I think he put it pretty succinctly, where the Supreme Court has always been behind the ball on gun rights, where they just trace what's what's popular and accepted. They're like, oh yeah, that's what the Constitution says is the popular accepted thing, which is like, at once it's like, when we're winning, that's not bad, but then it's also somewhat frustrating when it's like, and we'll have a story on this later, but it becomes extremely frustrating when they refuse, like when they could get ahead of the ball really easily and it wouldn't really upset that many people, but they choose not to, because them getting ahead of the ball on some issues invariably inflames things politically, especially in election years.
Right. And so they're like, no, we're not judicial activists.
Yeah, we're not judicial activists. We're just gonna do some judicial activism.
We're just an inactive judiciary.
We will use judicial activism to end judicial activism, and in so doing, create judicial activism.
Whoa, that's funny. All right, next up, guys. You know what's really important? It's vzgrips.com, guys. VZ Grips, longtime supporter of the show. I'm a promoter of VZ Grips. They're a supporter of the show. And if you go to vzgrips.com and use promotional code THISWEEK15, that's THISWEEK15, you're going to get yourself the fattest discount that is available to VZ Grips customers. VZ Grips is a good company. It's made of Florida, and they do the gun grip. They still haven't done the Draco grip, which... Oh, there's some new stuff coming on. There's some new stuff here. Let's look at that. Chisel shotgun stocks. What is that? Oh, that's okay. It's an R&R cover. Neat. What else? Scar Gray. Yeah. Ooh, AR-15 bundles.
They got AR-15s. How come they don't have good guns? How come they only have the assault rifle 15s? Yeah. I need my automatic killer 47s.
But yeah, guys, check out vzgrips.com. They've definitely got a grip for one of your guns. And if they don't, go out and buy a gun, throw those junky grips out, and get yourself some VZ Grips. Make it feel good in your paws. It's vzgrips.com. Promotional code this week, THISWEEK15. Next up, this is a interesting one. And it shows you we've been off for a minute because this article is 2 weeks old. But anyway... So JSD and Polymer80 have settled their lawsuit with Philadelphia and agreed to halt sales to Pennsylvania temporarily. So that's a thing.
Our regular and good non-defective way that our legal system's working.
Yeah. So yeah, Philadelphia filed suit against P80 and JSD, which we talked about recently back in July, accusing them of perpetuating gun violence through, and this is funny, perpetuating gun violence in the city by manufacturing and selling untraceable self-manufactured weapons, commonly known as ghost guns. How do you manufacture a self-manufactured? That's came under a broader legal effort to restrict where manufacturers can market their assemble-at-home guns. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, under the settlement, JSD Supplies, based in Butler, Pennsylvania, agreed it would no longer sell its products in the state for 4 years. Jeez. Oh yeah, and they also did own Pennsylvania's largest gun show thing, and they have to prohibit vendors from selling such parts for 2 years. P80 agreed to a 4-year ban on sales to customers in Philadelphia and nearby counties of Berks, Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Lancaster, Lehigh, Montgomery, and Northampton. Why does Pennsylvania all sound so British?
Well, there's actually a good story about that one.
To the cities of Allentown, Easton, Reading, and Lancaster. And additionally, P80 agreed to pay $1.3 million, which Philadelphia officials said will fund efforts to address gun violence. So that money will be ingested very quickly. Yeah, that sucks. That really sucks.
It's tough, and we've talked about it before. For the past several times this has happened, the real big issue here is I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel for these sorts of lawsuits where these states pass some insane law that's essentially like you can make the gun industry not exist here is the way that law actually works. And then these prosecutors will wield that like a fucking blunt instrument, and they will go and bludgeon any gun company that dares to do business in their state.
Right.
And it's like, why? Like unfair isn't even the right word. It's fucked up. It's constitutionally hilarious for multiple reasons. And all I'm saying is the next time we make a federal government, we should make it so the federal government is there to stop the states from fighting each other. That would be a really smart way to make a federal government, I think.
What if we just didn't? I mean, I don't, call me crazy. What if it was a rat king? Anyway, I'll just go move on. Colorado. The Colorado, that's where Coors Light is from. They have approved firearm bills related to liability insurance and the stupid dealer licensure. But I believe the assault weapons one, their advanced assault weapons one, passed the House and has been introduced in the Senate, but it's awaiting a hearing with the Senate Veterans and Military Affairs Committee.
I love democracy so much.
Yeah, so it's about this rat king.
About the rat king.
So House Bill 1270 would require gun owners to maintain liability insurance policy for damages that result from accidental discharge. That coverage could be wrapped up into renters and homeowners insurance. The fuck?
That's so stupid.
How often? Like NDs are pretty rare, right? Like,
right.
I mean, okay, so like they're not as rare as like, I don't know, Hashimoto's encephalopathy, right? But they're, in the course of an average person's life, they're pretty rare. I feel like there are other things that we run into that we just tolerate the risks of every day.
Right. That are like almost non-extant in comparison.
Yeah. Like ovens.
Right.
That's like oven is a fucking problem. You're talking about a barely controlled short circuit that you're dumping 220 volts into.
Or dryers where it's the same circuit, only you're getting increasingly dry, incredibly flammable material around in there.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. And we're like, yeah, but gotta have it. We don't have liability, like specific liability insurance for those things. And people leave them Johns on all the time, and it kills people.
Yep.
It's the same thing where, people are willing to accept the risk in something that they can comprehend the utility of. And when it comes to comprehending the utility of gun, people are stupid.
How about kitchen knife? We need kitchen knife insurance because people cut themselves with kitchen knives way more frequently than NDs happen.
Or even just like, I don't know, hot stuff.
Yeah.
In general. I got burned really bad today. And somebody should pay for this.
I got burned pretty bad today too. I leaned up against the muffler on my four-wheeler.
Did you?
It was not smart.
I was using a Sawzall.
Yeah.
It was actually a Ryobi. It wasn't a Sawzall. But anyway. And I was cutting through something and I was like, what the heck? Why did it stop? Because it was wood. And then I come off and just my thumb goes onto the blade.
Yep.
And I immediately get that bacon sizzling sound. I'm like, Oh no, there was a like nail sideways in it that just torqued my blade.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was awful. It's terrible when you smell that cooking smell, right? When you get
I'm warm.
No. But anyway, so yeah, that sucks, Colorado. It sucks to be you, I guess, but it doesn't suck to be a affiliate with FFL Payment Solutions, guys. Go to FFL Payment.
They fixed it.
Oh, yeah, they did. Where was it?
It was that by FFLs for FFLs there.
Yeah, but where? Oh, here. Yeah. That was awesome.
It's now fixed. I know. Somebody in the comments pointed it out like every time.
Oh, really?
It's fixed now.
Oh, thank God. Yeah, no, we made him do it. But yeah, FFLpaymentprocessing.com. Guys, if you are friends with an FFL and you want to save them, keep a little more money, bring it home to the kids, you've got to hook them up with FFLpaymentprocessing.com, guys. You are leaving money on the table. And if you let them know, right? Let them know. Let your local gun shop friend that you love, let them know to contact FFL Payment Solutions and let FFL Payment Solutions know that Fudbusters sent you, in which case, should you follow those terms and conditions, they will get free terminals. I'm talking good stuff, the tappy type. All right. So anyway, guys, check it out. That's a big value. FFLpaymentprocessing.com. They will save you money and they will never drop you for dealing in the industry. So FFLpaymentprocessing.com. Good company. I'm personally involved with it. It's good stuff. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't. I use it. Anyway. People started telling me like, oh, you should be more open about the stuff that you're like involved in, that you whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. It feels weird.
There's social pressure now. I'm not going to be your friend unless you use it.
Well, yeah, and also like I believe in the products. So like if somebody's like, if I do an ad on this show, it's either that we believe in the product, right? Or in one particular instance, it was snuck in and we made it very clear how we felt about it during the ad read.
It would be cool if you could shoot the terminal. Do you think you shoot the terminal?
anyway. There's another, but like that's just my whole thing is like if I'm advertising something, I feel like people should know like it's actually something good. I would actually, they're good people that actually like the VZ Grips, good people, Patriot Patch, good people, all the like it's always good stuff. So I feel like I kind of felt like if I was like, hey, this is my company, it would kind of cheapen that, I guess. But I don't know, maybe I'm stupid, but yeah, full disclosure, I'm a part of FFL Payment Processing. I'm their lawyer. So, I don't like own a major amount of it or anything, but it's a good thing. So whatever.
Go to the gun store that has the old people that say that we don't take that plastic internet money. We only do the greenback dollary dues. Yeah. Tell them to fix their cursed ways.
Yeah, give them and spank them too. Next up, Nevada's ghost gun ban ruled constitutional by top court.
The top dog.
Top court. The top court has said the ghost gun ban is A-OK, and that sucks, right? Because this was Polymer80. This is their home. This is their little campground, and the issue here is that the lower court kind of handed them the win wrong, right?
Yeah. The question here, essentially what had happened was Nevada banned ghost guns as a part of that. Self-made firearms, ghost guns. As a part of that, they banned, quote unquote, unfinished frames and receivers. Of course, we all understand they were trying to go after 80% stuff. This like fundamentally endangers Polymer80's business because they make them in that state. And as far as I remember, there was not a carve out for you can make them here, you just can't sell them here.
Right.
I think it was like you can't, like you're going to be making them in some other state, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's
go somewhere else.
So it's pretty tough for them in that regard. And I think they had not had success in federal courts initially, and so they ran to state court to try and get something. The lower court sort of handed them an injunction, and it was like weirdly argued. And of course, state courts are always weirdly argued, and they're always weirdly answered. And the court's answer was that they agreed that unfinished frame or receiver is too vague. The problem, I think, with that reasoning, and I believe the Supreme Court, their top court, Supreme Court, the Nevada court that then said that the ban was actually the Nevada big court. Their sort of answer to response to that was, well, it's not actually vague. It says if it's an unfinished frame or receiver, then it's banned. Yeah. And it doesn't, because Polymer80 is here trying to get an answer where it's like, is 50% finished unfinished enough? But the law's not contemplating how unfinished it needs to be. It's saying if it's an unfinished frame or receiver, you can't have it. So there's certainly a question of unconstitutionally broad, where it's like this could ban everything at that point. I don't think there's a question of vagueness where it's like, if you're selling a block of steel and saying this is for making a receiver from, I think you'd be in trouble. If you were just selling the block of steel and saying, I'm McMaster Carr, you can come and buy Sten receivers here, believe it or not, that'd probably be okay.
I'm McMaster Carr. There's Stens in here. There's also other stuff.
There's Stens and all sorts of other goodies. You can look them up.
This steel. if you free them. I like the way you put it earlier when we were chatting about this. So I'm gonna make myself look smart by taking your words from the past and putting them into the present. Which is Polymer80 was trying to hash out this thing with this lawsuit by saying, right, well, you're just not making it clear where the line is, and we're wanting to be on the correct side of the line, and you made it all hard, right? And the lower court was like, yeah, they made it hard, but then the Supreme Court is like, no, they just took the line off.
Yeah, there isn't a line.
Not a line. You're not allowed to do it anymore. There's no right side for you. It's
like putting an extra polymer wall in the back or putting in 2 extra polymer walls doesn't make it not an unfinished frame or receiver. It's just a less finished frame or receiver. And
not drilling this hole or whatever,
Right. Like, it's not a ban on more than less finished. It's a ban on all of them. And that's sort of the defect with these things, that eventually there is an overly broad argument. I don't think there's a
then the question is, how do you make them if you can't ever not finish them, right? And I think it's because it probably hinges on the actual sale, or where you can make the argument that, oh, these are in production, they're not for sale. This is unfinished goods.
The next time we make a federal government, we should make it so the federal government identifies rights that are inalienable to the people that reside in that country, and that everybody who resides in the states within that country is also bound by those same rights. Anyway, the Rat King will figure this out.
Yeah, no. So let's talk about a reliable way to make a country, and we make a Rat King.
Yep.
And then we set a constitution, we write everything down, and then we say, all right, any amendments or changes that can be made from here at this point forward must be by rat decree, and he must say it in plain English, and he's a rat.
But Sire Rat, I desperately demand to ban the import of these dastardly firearms.
Squeak!
He didn't say yes.
He squeaked at the cheese.
And all of politics, like C-SPAN is just a 24/7 live feed of this rat running around in his like little rat wheel and his little rat maze, and like the lobbyists just bring him cheese to try and teach him English.
They're like, please just say this.
It's just like genetically altered cheese. They're putting uranium isotopes in the cheese to try and like melt his brain into being capable of speaking.
But he's a rat. Never gonna happen. It's just never gonna work. And then watch they do it, and he's just the most. He's like the most vile creature. He thinks the way a rat would think.
Bring me more concubines.
Like, now that I can say what I want, no more mazes, just cheese. Oh, I'll hear your bill when you've brought me all the cheese. All right. So that sucks. That is horrible. Just like the other thing we talked about that was horrible with P80s. And I hate to see it. democracy or something.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something. And then, it seems the gun industry is just not doing hot right now. And this is something that, could have been predicted a while back. During COVID, a lot of people who were, more veteran in the gun industry were like, you're going to see people are going to be expanding during this time, and those people are going to be going bankrupt.
Yep. And
it's kind of started to happen. And we're seeing a lot of places like really struggling, and it's not good. Sales are just slowing down. And the simple fact is that guns are a pretty durable product. And eventually people kind of, especially the people who bought like 6 or 7 guns during the whatever, will hit a point, and it becomes easier to hit that point when the government keeps making our money worth less.
Yep.
But like in an alarming rate, that you're like, maybe I can just not buy them for a minute. And this has negatively impacted me and my business, but hey, you got to work with it. You got to deal with it. It's a cyclical industry. One company who couldn't quite deal with it so good was Kalashnikov USA. And they are not doing so hot. So this is, we heard about this, and the scoop was released last week. And this is from AK Quality Enforcement, rumors are true. Kalashnikov USA is closing its doors as of this coming Monday and laid off their employees, expected to go into bankruptcy. I'll be able to share more from my sources as I get the go-ahead. But for now, this is what I'm able to share. RIP FN chat. Should have used that. Blah, blah, blah. Owners may be going to bank tomorrow to try to buy it back from the bank. I'll update when I know more. Edit for the idiots. I'm sure KUSA will continue to be a company after an acquisition, depending if there's a bankruptcy and are parted out. Time will tell, but negotiations will be going on for next couple weeks. So yeah, Kalashnikov went under.
And the most recent things that I had seen on this was that maybe they are still doing RMAs, and maybe they are still like extant, but I have personally seen people who are said to have worked there, like people I know who I trust, who knew people who worked there, and those guys are like, "Yep, they just showed up and they fired me," and we're not hearing anything, and that it's one of these situations where it's like, yeah, that's never good.
Yeah, no, and I know some people that were there and just got the can. It sucks. It's horrible. It sucks. It's and the thing that's really terrible is that these wind up being these aren't huge companies, right? These aren't like thousands of employees. They've
right.
It's a few core people that you really depend on, and the thing is, the people up top know about it for a long time, and they get put in this catch-22 situation where, like, they can't tell everybody, hey, like, it's not looking good, because then you'll start draining everyone, and then there goes your chance of doing an upshot, and kind of at the last minute, everybody gets left with the bag. And once it's bag leaving time, you can't even give them a severance or anything.
Yep.
So it really sucks. I've seen it happen more than once, but that is what happened. But what was interesting is when the rumor mill started going around, of course, people started running their mouths because what are you going to do about it? And we learned like some interesting shit. Like they had owed. Yeah.
Like the origins of we sort of found more about the origins of the company, because that's something that's always been hotly debated on the internet, as well as the fact that their financial hardships were sort of exposed in a court dealing where they owe a bunch of money to I think it's like Indomim, which is an Indian, India, the country, and United States based MIM, so metal injection membrane. It's like squirting hot plastic into a vacuum mold company. So they owe a significant amount of money to this company and have stopped making payments to this company. And so the company came after them with the lawyers, the angry ones.
Yeah, the spicy lawyers.
And so they've got some sort of hardship going on there. The reason KUSA stood up, I guess the short version of it, is after Kalashnikov imports were banned, there was a company in Israel that wanted to see if they could bring AKs from Russia into Israel and then bring them into the US and be like, surprise, these were made in Israel. And then I think the answer they got was no. And so they were looking to like see if they could get data from Russia and then make some parts in Israel. And that was supposed to be the AK Alpha, not to be confused with the AK-105 Alpha
Right.
that the Russian special forces used, but the AK Alpha, which is it's a whole separate thing. It was like sort of a Galil polymer chassis thing on a AK. It's an interesting gun. You can look them up. And they had bolt hold opens, which is kind of cool. But they were looking at bringing these in, and Kalashnikov USA was stood up from a company that was RWA, which had been importing Saigas before the import ban. And RWA was meant to be importing these AK Alphas, and then they renamed the company to Kalashnikov USA, and the Israeli company became a Kalashnikov Israel or Kalashnikov IWI or something like that. And so they were supposed to have been making guns like this. I don't think any AK Alphas ever came into the country. And if they did, it was probably like a haha, Larry Vickers, funny, why is that here sort of way. And so KUSA, started making Saigas, I believe was their first. And then from there, they sort of branched out into making other stuff. Right. And I suppose that was probably, and I know they've got like some sort of like incestuous relationship with PTR and Mossberg and all sorts of other stuff. So there's like all sorts of like funny corporate dealings going on there.
Right.
But sort of the long and short of it was they were never like meant to be manufacturing, and they were really never meant to be like really manufacturing, like actually making all of the parts and then making the guns.
Right.
And that's a big bite to take off and chew. And that's something that really only comes out affordably at large scale, especially with something like the AK. Because
Right.
as much as everybody wants to point to the AK and be like, oh, it's cheap, and then the Taliban in the caves and they make them in the rocks, they bang the rocks together and make, that's not true. That doesn't happen. They don't make AKs in caves. You're a fucking hooligan. Stop. To tool up to, in the current age, to tool up to make AKs is substantially more expensive than to make ARs.
Anything else, well, especially with CNC machines, right? Because you can just cut ARs out of blocks. AKs are very temperamental and like want to be made a specific way. That says it is like, if you are a country that doesn't pay for labor.
Right. And, it's very cheap to make AKs.
Yeah, and can build a factory the size of a town that has raw materials being poured into one side and a opening on the other side where guns flow out. AKs are actually the cheapest thing to do.
And it's one of those interesting economies of scale thing where it's like sometimes that scale needs to be the nation state level scale, and then it really gets really cheap.
Yeah.
But short of that,
because forging is like a pretty stupid thing to do if you're not making just that one part. It's
expensive and time intensive to figure out. And then sort of the other big issue with the AKs is what with the reciprocating parts of the guns being comprised of actually like 30 different parts. It's a ton of different parts involved with reciprocation.
Right.
Almost all of them have different heat treat specs. It's all over the place, which is, I mean, I'm going to call it's a defect of sort of old world manufacturing approaches where that was just, okay, that's fine. That's normal. Because you assume all of your material qualities are dog shit because you don't actually know what good material is. You don't have allowables for anything. So you just assume your material is shit. So you have heat treating control everything. And so because of that, your gun's like a nightmare to manufacture correctly. And so a big amount of the sort of learning of making AKs in the United States has been, how much of that stupidity do we have to carry forward? Can we not just make it out of a better steel and then heat treat everything to a sort of consistent normal amount? So we've only got maybe 5 heat treat specs in the entire gun instead of like 30. Which then simplifies it, and that's the reason that U.S. made AKs continue to at least hold price parity with where they've always been, but continue to become a better product at that same price. So there is some forward movement on that, but the way this shakes out for KUSA is there's other outfits that are making guns at the same or maybe marginally better quality, and they don't cost anywhere near as much, and they've got better QC because they're a larger. They're a larger company as it stands, so their QC is better, their customer-facing support is better, their ability to have guns on shelves and get guns shipped out quickly is better, and that means that you don't survive, and it's sort of crummy. But I mean, there's probably worse companies that could have happened to this sort of thing, from a standpoint of like it would hurt the gun owning community more because right, it's not like there isn't a bunch of different outfits that you can get an AK that's a more or less equivalent to what KUSA makes. It's not like they are like really striking out and doing something nobody else had. Not like they were like bringing an AN-94 to market next month or anything. Really
Right.
cool
No,
like
they were
that.
doing the bump rivet, which I
Right.
mean, at least as far as their 7.62 guns are concerned, which is like to
It's
me
cool,
a defect.
it's cool, but the only reason that the Russians actually went and did that is because they were trying to parts consolidate so hard that they were like, even the bullet guides are going to start becoming the same piece, and the trunnions are going to start becoming the same piece, and all of these guns are going to be put together the same way.
Right.
Which, you know, again, at the nation state level, that makes a lot of sense because you've parsed your bill of materials down to like hilariously small numbers for the amount of SKU that you actually have.
Right.
For the building like maybe 100,000 guns a year, but probably not even that. It doesn't make sense. Not a lot of sense anyway.
Yeah. And so yeah, there was that, and then they had the VITs, which a lot of people went crazy about. I never saw the appeal. Sorry, I never.
I shot one, and I thought I shot a friend's, and I was like, wow, this thing's real. I did the same thing that I've done multiple times now, where with 9mm straight blowback guns, where I'm like, wow, this thing's like super soft. Like this thing's almost MP5 soft. And then we put this gun on a scale. It weighs 12 pounds. He had his gun covered in lights and rails, and like the whole Zynico catalog. He just fucking smacked it with. And whenever the thing weighs 12 pounds, sure, it's almost smooth like an MP5. But I really don't care for how they shoot. It's got the weird center of gravity thing going on that I don't like. And
right,
I mean, they're cool, but it's not the sort of thing where I'm like, when I think of like a really great 9mm blowback, 9mm anything, right? PCC, that's not in my top 5, or probably not in my top 10. The AKVs or the Vityazes, I'm just like, okay, that's one of the guns of all time to me.
Yeah, no, and honestly, having shot both the Kalash product and the PSAs, to me, it's like
supposedly the difference is that the Kalashnikov USA ones don't fire out of battery constantly, or some of the PSA ones do. But then here's the other thing: is like PSA will have your gun fixed and back to you in like a week.
So the couple that I've run didn't have any out of battery problems, but when I was shooting them. But just from a user experience standpoint, I was like, this is not that different.
Right. And KUSA's devotion to using actual Vityaz pattern magazines is cool and all, but
very cool.
It's probably not the right call because it's a pretty proprietary mag. Like,
and then they already
uses them.
The funny thing is, as soon as people caught whiff of them going under, everyone ran out of Vityaz mags. Which it's not like, people don't understand. It's not that this stuff isn't going to go away, right? All of these assets are still here. They're still sitting around, and someone is going to pick them up.
There's enough guns that if it's Triple K or somebody's going to be making Vityaz mags after this.
Right. And somebody's probably going to keep making these guns.
Yes.
So, but it is the thing that's to be sad about is the fact that this was, a lot of people's jobs, a lot of people's livelihoods, and it went down. So that's the thing to be sad about, in my opinion. All right, next up, guys, it's MAF Corporation. Guys, MAF Corp is the place you go to get the chime stuff, and it's important. There is, speaking of AK stuff, there is 545 flavor AK chimes, and there's a big sale going on. And there's also the 7.62 flavor ones. The sale is even bigger. I see you click here and you think you see a price, but it's actually a lower price. So guys, check that out. Do yourself a Plastikov, do yourself an Amigo Verde, and go to maf-arms.com and use promotional code FUDBusters to get yourself 10% off. If you think about some of those prices, that's a big deal. But guys, maf-arms.com, promotional code FUDBusters. All right, next up, of course, we got to talk about this. And this is something I really wanted to do an independent video on. And like, a lot of you guys are asking me, well, when's the Fudbusters content going to come back? Like the real Fudbusters stuff. You know what? I promise I'm working on it. But here's how my triage, my morality triage works. If there's a deadline coming up within 2 or 3 weeks, I don't care how much work I've already gotten done on something. If it's for somebody who's in custody, that's it. that's all I'm doing. I'm making sure I'm keeping everything with them, and they like owned me for that period of time, and that's what went on with Adamiak. So I wasn't doing anything. I was just making sure that massive fucking document was done to the best of my ability. So ATF dropped the new in the business of rule, and I couldn't do anything. Couldn't do anything except answer phone calls from a bunch of my industry friends asking me, right? And I'm like, you're in the industry, you idiot. You already have the license. Like, shut up. But yeah, so Ivan, why don't you take this away from us? What's the big Biden Supreme Court on fire going on here?
So I mean, like you've introduced there was a whole lot of hubbub about this.
Yeah.
For those of you who are devoted Fudbusters listeners, you'll know that back before this rule was even proposed, in fact, I think it was before the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act had actually passed, we said right here on this show exactly what was going to happen with this. We said exactly what was going to happen, where they're going to take the language that's in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which is they're redefining what in the business means from deriving like primarily a livelihood, which ATF has maintained in the past to be like, it's your job, right? It's how you sustain yourself. It's your income.
Yeah.
And that has had its definition changed by Congress to pecuniary, with the principal goal of pecuniary gain.
Yeah.
And pecuniary is like one of them weasel words, and that's what really initially keyed me into. That's not a regular person word. They're going to have ATF define that. And so ATF has come in and defined that, and it's a massive document with a lot of words, and it says a lot of nothing. And I saw a lot of like theory crafting from the greater gun tube space, including some theory crafting that was like outright wrong, or and admittedly I've read like 25% of the actual document, but like even if they had read 25%, they'd know that the things they're theory crafting, the ATF specifically says they're not doing here. Like the ATF specifically says, no, even we're not that crazy. Even we wouldn't fuck with that. So
like they're specifically like, because one of the things that they know they can't touch is I buy 3 guns to get the best one, right? As a collector or whatever. But that's not to say it's not concerning, right? So what they spend most of their time doing is being like, it's not just profit. Profit isn't the same as pecuniary,
right? So in money and pecuniary isn't fiscal,
right? So it could be like, so basically they're explaining how there could be all these different types of intangible benefits. Is basically if they feel like they can prove, or they feel like they have enough of an inclination that you're doing it for a pecuniary, which I know again, so like
it's one of them evil words,
intangible, like space tradey way.
Like if there's a benefit to your, not even net worth, but if there's a benefit to your gun owning position on net, because like if you trade a gun for a gun, even if the gun you trade for is worth a lesser dollar value, if the reason that you're trading for that gun is because you're holding it as a speculative asset, and you think like, oh, in 2 years these things will be worth a lot more, you may have run afoul.
Or even status, or like I took this very poor trade so that I can get in with this guy, right? Or this is the new gun that is good for basketball of something. I shouldn't have said that. It's good for golf players. God, I'm sorry. This is the new golf gun. I will be like revered by the golfmen if I have this gun, right? So they're explaining, and it takes a lot of words to explain that it's like, so your life is an RPG, right? And there's your money account, like there's your gil or whatever. There's your gold level, but then there's also your EXP. There's also your position in your faction. There's also like, your skill, like all of these other things. So they're like, if it makes number go up, it's potentially a problem.
But see, then the hard thing and I guess we'll end up closing the discussion on this story, I think, by sort of touching on the sort of 2 ways I think this could actually be challenged. But you backing up the sort of reason that they're going to, the reason they're saying all this is because because pecuniary is so narrow, they've given themselves the sort of latitude where they can threaten you with all this stuff, but they're not going to come right out and say what is and isn't legal, right? They're not going to actually like, this isn't a paint by numbers. This is like a Pollock Picasso nightmare, a mixture of Pollock, Picasso, and MC Escher, where it's like a mind fuck that's impossible to interpret, and it's actually just lazily slapped together from a standpoint of presentation, where they're not going to tell you how to stay inside of the lines, and that's really not a good thing. And so that's because of that, I think that's probably one of the ways that this could potentially be challenged in court, is that if from a Administrative Procedures Act standpoint, if you come in to clarify something, you should probably make it more clear than it was before. Personally, I think that there's a non-insane argument for, I think pecuniary just as a word on its own was more clear than
what they're doing.
Pecuniary could be anything, or it could be nothing, or you could lose money, or you could make money, or it could be one gun. In fact,
pecuniary was always understood to be profit, like in a fiduciary and other financial sense. Like so I do think from the APA, this is not a legitimate rulemaking because it's not clarifying.
Right.
It's you can't take one word and turn it into 40 pages. I think is.
Right. And I don't even know that it's really implementing either, because if it was implementing, I think they'd have to say this is how it works.
Yeah, if there was implementing, then there would ultimately be numbers to paint it.
Right.
But they're not. They're saying, this shit's fucking weird. Like, I don't know when you're dealing, but I'll know.
Right. And it could be one gun, and in fact, it could be 0 guns. You could just be contemplating the sale, and that might be a problem.
Yeah. But so, is this something for you to freak out over? No, I don't think so.
I don't really think so. And so even if you're just contemplating the sale, you could still run afoul of this, which is it's just sort of bizarro. And so if you're the kind of person who's got, we're speaking in terms of broad hypotheticals. If you're the kind of person from a standpoint of should you worry about this, should you not? If you're the kind of person who's got a gun broker account, right, and you're selling 100 guns a year or 20 guns a month, and you don't have a license, and there's a public record of the fact you're selling these things that anyone can see on the, you might want to consider either getting counsel, or potentially making that conversation and doing the dirty and getting a license, or maybe you become a test case if that's what you want to do. But it's certainly a thing that this has been a priority of the ATF even before Biden. As I understand it, this sort of rulemaking, even before the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, was something the ATF wanted to do. Where they where in the past they've wanted to define the principal, objective, livelihood, profit, blah blah blah, as being this same thing. Where it's if you make one gun, it's the principal, livelihood, objective, profit. Right. The thing that they're trying to cut, ATF foolishly believes that this is going to make it easier for them to get gun traffickers. It won't. Yeah.
And that's what I was going to say. What they think they're doing here is that they think that they're making prosecutions and indictments of gun traffic, right? Easier. But no, what it's doing is it's making it easier for them to harass the old man who likes to play around at gun shows. That's what they're doing. If you're the old man who likes to buy and sell and flip and stuff at gun shows, this is after you. This is
9/11. This is 9/11 for gun show boomers.
Yeah, it really is, because a lot of those guys, they don't have a license, and what are they there for? I mean, look, I think they should be able to do whatever they want. I think you should be able to send guns anywhere in the world. I think hell, look at MAF, look at my Fudbusters AK vending machine shirt. That's what I want. But if to tell you realistically who should be worried about this, gun show boomers and serial pawn shop flippers, right? If you just go to and flip guns on Gunbroker, not that they should bother you, because if you're selling on a Gunbroker, it's going to an FFL, but they might bother you. they might bother you over that. So that's and it makes it easy for them to pick on those people. So I think that if you run a popular table at a gun show, they're probably going to harass you.
And here's $1 worth of free legal advice. If you get the ATF to come to talk to you about this sort of a thing, keep your mouth shut. Do your absolute best to not talk.
Yeah, that was the whole engaged in the business thing. Sorry, guys, we had something sidetracked us substantially. Next up, this is good. This is pretty good. So yeah, a Cambridge school resource officer accidentally fired their gun while taking it off of a restroom hook. So this is your completely normal cop negligently discharging into bathroom. And then playing SIG. Well, so actually this was first, right? Officer's gun that fired inside Cambridge school is latest Sig Sauer incident. That was on the 4th. So yeah, veteran Cambridge police officer's gun discharged inside a public school staff bathroom earlier this week. A latest instance of a Sig Sauer P320 pistol allegedly firing without an intentional trigger pull. Yeah, they confirmed this was a 320, blah, blah, blah. And then later on, yeah, no, he just ND'd. He just ND'd.
Perhaps Sig Bros are finally beating the allegations.
Sig Bros. Rise up. Just kidding, don't. But you know who does rise up, guys? It's Patriot Patch Company. And don't go nowhere. We have one more story. Patriot Patch has custom designed patches, apparel, and accessories for any freedom-loving individual. I've got the freshest one right here. You fill my heart to full capacity. That's actually not the freshest one, but I never showed it, and I like it. Let's check out what's the current patch of the month. Whoa. Freedom isn't free. This is the May exclusive, and you got the M1 Garand and the M16A4.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Yep, there's one limited run PVC patch ampersand sticker. Freedom is not free. If you join up, you get a new patch every month, and it's fantastic. You're going to love it. You're going to have a nice time. That's patriotpatch.co, and if you use code TWIG10, that's TWIG10, they'll know that we're doing our job. You'll support the show. You'll support a good company that keeps getting deplatformed, and everything will be nice. So do it. Do it on there. And check out their other stuff. They got some other accessories you might want. That's patriotpatch.co, promotional code TWIG10, TWIG10. All right, and last up here, analysis. And this is great. Another article from our dear friend, Konstantinos Moros. I don't know how to do a Greek accent.
Maybe it sounds like Finnish people. I don't know.
Now, Illinois attempts fate in SCOTUS defense of AR-15 ban.
I thought this was a pretty good story.
Yeah.
So as you guys may remember from, I think we talked about last time, last month in guns, we had touched on, the Supreme Court has before it like 4 or 5 different assault weapons bans. In a I guess most of them, all of the ones from Illinois, are in a preliminary stage, but then it's also got Bianchi out of Maryland in a like very strange stage where it's like it's on judgment, but then it was reheard en banc. Well, I guess it was heard in front of a panel. It didn't have a judgment from the panel, and then it was yanked to en banc. A very unusual posture it finds itself in. And so they asked the Supreme Court, like, hey, can we stop screwing around and you guys just hear this? So there's now briefs. The briefs, the cases keep getting longer as more briefs happen.
Right.
And the briefs are now in from the states, the respective states in these cases. Yep. And very, very interestingly, we've seen them more or less coalesce under the same sort of arguments. Partway this was forced because, in Bianchi, Maryland is relying on, I think it's Colby v. Hogan was a case from Maryland before then, which was like one of those like blatantly interest balancing cases. They didn't even try to call it interest balancing. It was just like bad. And that was sort of the birthplace of this, or sort of like the the first time that this idea that, oh, Heller said you could ban guns that are like military guns really came from.
Yeah.
Heller doesn't say that. That little weird blurb in Heller about M16s doesn't say that. In fact, it kind of says the opposite, if anything. It's just like bizarre arguments. And the panel in Colby had propped that up. Bianchi was like poised to reverse that. Then Bruin happened, and so they sent Bianchi back down to have it flushed out better, and then it didn't actually ever get flushed out after a substantial amount of time because they were just waiting on the panel. So the sort of position that we're in now is the Supreme Court's got all these cases in front of them. Illinois relied on that same reasoning from Colby, where it was like, oh, but it's more like a military weapon. And they're taking it steps further to say that weapons that are like military weapons aren't arms at all, which is a fascinating thing to see read when they've got their expert witnesses saying that 1911s and Beretta M9s and even SIG M17s are like good, reasonable options that you could use for home defense instead of an AR-15. Like you're left there going, my brain feels so dumb. My brain feels so dumb for you. And it's really an interesting thing. And so, our friend Mr. Moros's analysis here is more or less saying that these sorts of games that these states are playing, which is like wild, it goes beyond defiant of Bruin, right? They've convinced activist judges to just try and we're going to be our own Supreme Court and write our own landmark decisions and just do whatever we want. That these sorts of things do tempt the Supreme Court. And while I wouldn't necessarily count on the Supreme Court taking any of these cases at this point, and frankly, I think the writing on the wall sort of points to they're going to wait until after the election, right, to do it. That's my guess, anyways. Right after the election, they'll suddenly be gung ho to hear assault weapons ban cases again, regardless of who wins the election, even. And it's unfortunate that it has to work that way, but that's my opinion. In my opinion, and plus 25 cents would make you 25 cents richer, which is not nothing.
That's true.
So that's sort of where I think things lay on this. It would be, of course, I hope they do take either of these cases sooner, and they could take a combination of the cases. Like they could just take the assault weapons ban question in the Maryland case and just the magazine portion in Illinois, so that at once they could say, yes, these are arms. Are you guys stupid? Which would be cool for them to say, but it's something that remains to be seen, really.
Yeah. This is really interesting. But yeah, no, thanks, Kostas, for their article. This is good. And it is, they do have to take it up, and I hope it happens soon, because it's hardware bans are just effed out.
And the worst part is, like, hardware bans were answered in Heller. Heller was a hardware ban case. It was like a really straightforward hardware ban case, even.
Oh, nothing about Heller is straightforward because of how abortive that the court was at the time. Like it was like Heller's a real kind of shitty piece of writing.
It definitely needs some unfucking.
Yeah.
The methodology in Heller specifically, as applied to arms ban cases, is pretty straightforward, and I think it's workable. Maybe it needs a tweak here or there, but I think it's workable. It's not like it's inconsistent with history or tradition, and it's not like it's useless. But the problem is I don't think in all the hardware bans that have been touched on since, I don't think a single one has tried to actually apply Heller. It's like interest balancing nonsense, or like their new thing under Bruin, which is like, what is an arm? Who knows? How could we possibly figure this out? Like Bruin only tells us what an arm is like 6 different places, and Heller did it once dispositively. What could it possibly mean? And it's one of these things where the courts are allowed to act ignorant. Like even when the Supreme Court comes right out and says in black and white, like they could say the sky is blue, and then a court in California will sit there and go, what's the sky mean? What's blue mean? How are we supposed to figure this out? This is an unworkable precedent. It's just sort of the tough situation we find ourselves in, is at the mercy of, I don't want to say lesser, because I don't think that they're doing it because they're dumb. I think they're doing it because they're smart.
Yeah, no, it's being done on purpose is the thing that sucks the most. But yeah, so we will keep an eye on it for sure. Anyway, guys, that's it for the moment. It is good to see you again, and I'll be here now. I promise. So that's it for the moment. We will see you next time.
Bye.